Welcome to the Totally African podcast. I'm your host, John Kennedy Otieno. And in case you're new here, this is a podcast where we showcase African stories of African people doing incredible work to build our continent. And on this episode, we have yet another amazing person in studio with us. His name is Abbas Mpindi, all the
Yes,
way from Uganda,
all the way from Uganda.
representing our friends over in
256.
256.
Yes,
Mr. Bass,
yes, sir.
welcome. Please, I feel like
Thank
you
you.
do a better job introducing yourself than I did. So
Oh,
I'm going to give you the opportunity to redo it.
okay. So my name is Abbas Impindi. I work as the CEO of Media Challenge Initiative in Uganda. We are building the next generation of journalists, storytellers, and leaders. What that means is that every day we prepare young people for the future of media work and ensure that they are they have the capacity, the confidence, and the creativity to demand more and to negotiate more and to offer more in a workspace, but also that they have the capacity to create new media platforms that can provide alternative voices, a platform. And they also have the brand because now more than ever, journalists have to fight and struggle for a space that's highly, saturated with other influencers and citizen journalists. So journalists rely on their credibility and brand as thought leaders to be able to not only influence but to share information that can help people to make the best decisions in their lives.
Ah, amazing.
Yes.
Now, if I can take you back a little bit to how the media um, challenge initiative came into existence, could you
Yes.
tell us that story?
Yeah, so I was a journalism student and I went to ask for an internship. I was told at the just at the security point at the TV station that I needed to know someone there. And for me,
By needing to know someone, what does it mean?
we're talking about nepotism. You know,
So
you know,
basically,
you know what I mean. Like you need to know
it's
someone
a totally African
that
thing.
no, it's not really African. I wouldn't say it's African. It's just the idea of technical know-who rather than technical know-how. I believe that young people deserve opportunities. They deserve to be exposed, not just because they know someone somewhere as a relative, but rather because they have incredible skills and their merit to be in those spaces. So for me, it was a failed internship where you go to ask for space and you're told you need to know someone. And I went back to school saying no young person should ever have to go through that to experience that. And that's why I created the first inter-university media challenge platform where young journalists can come and showcase their skills and talents and get exposed. Pretty much that's it.
So when you are starting this, when did you start this media challenge initiative? What year was it?
So we're talking about 2012, and now we started just as a movement of young journalists coming together to organize media competitions for ourselves, and then we moved into creating an academy, and then into a media hub. Now we have a media van that we are driving all the way from Uganda to here, to just tell stories. The same thing you're doing about, how do we tell stories, extraordinary stories that are not being reported about, things that you are doing, things that other young people are doing on the continent, but that don't get
Get attention that they
um,
deserve.
mainstreamed in the media. And for me, that's why we also have created a platform called Switch Africa, which we're showcasing here at the Africa Media Festival. And Switch Africa is young people should star, or young people should be the star of their news stories. A young person like you telling a story of another young person, and we're talking about um referencing success that looks like you and seeing it just hits different.
Mm.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that one of the things that journalists are currently facing is the competition from non-trained journalists, so citizen journalists,
Yeah.
influencers, because our market has become sort of saturated, and that's why it is more important. Before, journalists just had to come and report the news or
Yeah.
tell you the stories, but now you also have to be a personal brand on top of that to set
Yeah.
you apart.
Yeah.
What are other challenges that you might have experienced with the Media Challenge Initiative as you were setting up to now? that you are seeking to address with this foundation?
I mean, first of all, like journalists have always been the OG influencers and they have always been brands. Like we all would go back to them to find out if things are true, factual, correct in our communities because they're custodians of information. Of course, that has been, disrupted by influencer marketing, technology, citizen journalism. Now anyone can break the news. So it's no longer an exclusion to just journalists. Now, that's one of the challenges, but it's also an opportunity because we are also in the same landscape. If you can imagine, like people will still come back to journalists to fact check information that they've seen on social media or anywhere. And then, of course, we are still dealing with, how the traditional advertising model where media houses would earn income have been disrupted. So we're saying, what are the new ideas around how we can sustain newsrooms and keep the lights on? And with that, you have to think about, you know, new business models, new revenue models for newsrooms that can be, you know, applied. So, and as a young person, a young innovator, even if you're starting now, you have to think about that for the fifth year, for the sixth year of your business. So it's a long game.
Wow. Now, 13 years after inception, you said you started at 2012. We are now in 2025. So that's 13 years. Could you give us a highlight of your footprint of impact so far?
We've run a fellowship program for the last 7 years, and that has led to 180 young journalists going through that fellowship and entering into the mainstream media. 135 of those are working in the media space. Now, when people ask you about impact, of course, you go into numbers, but the real issue here is the real impact is changing people's lives. Those young journalists who go through our platform end up working, getting a job, providing for their families. But most importantly, they end up, working on stories, publishing stories that impact communities. So we look at impact in terms of how many people are impacted by the stories that are published by these young journalists in communities. We can talk about like infrastructure impact in our communities where we've set up a media hub in Uganda where journalists can come and have a shelter and do their stories, where new innovators in the media landscape can come and have an office. Those are infrastructure milestones, but the real impact is how the journalism landscape keeps progressing and improving because of the work of those journalists we've trained. And we're not training them for now, but for the next, for the future. And also, what is also important is that they're not just journalists or reporting stories, they're reporting history and they're reporting stories that change their communities.
Amazing. Now, when we started, you started by saying that the reason why the Media Challenge Initiative came about was because you did not want to be in a position where any other young journalist needs the
Yeah,
technical know-who instead of the
definitely.
technical know-how. So
Yes.
that brings me to the question, what are the criteria to be part of this fellowship? If, say, a young journalist from Kenya wants to come and be part of the Media Challenge Initiative.
So I mean, I'll go back to like, how do you deal with nepotism? You just flip nepotism. Train as many young people as you can and get that talent and surround it any person who is recruiting. The end goal is, as a recruiting editor, I will have immense talent that then I'm playing with, right? So that's how you flip this
Is
concept.
there
And then technical, we all deserve technical know-how, but we deserve technical know-how that's backed by technical know-how.
hmm,
So character skill. Let people know you by the quality of your work, by the quality of your character. And then opportunities will follow you. Does that make sense? And then to your question of how do you get to be part of this fellowship program. So we have mainly focused in Uganda for the fellowship program, but we are looking at opportunities how we can scale this program to include other students in other universities across the continent. So far, we've got one, I would say we call it a teaser. A young journalist from Egypt applied for our fellowship this year, and we said, oh, maybe we should try and play with that. So you never know, next year we might come there. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Which brings me to probably one of our last or second to last questions. What impact or what do you see as the future of the Media Challenge Initiative? What
So
is in the
the
plans for the
they
future?
the we like specific to that, there are many ways to look at impact, like I said. So for me, the first is that community is key. We've built a community of young journalists who not only just think about reporting stories, but who think about each other as human beings. So I always say, first you inspire to build a good human being, and that good human being will make a good journalist. So we have built an amazing community of young journalists who support each other, who believe in each other, and who provide each other opportunities. And I believe for me that's is going to be MCI's biggest, contribution to the industry is like this group of young journalists, this movement of young journalists who support each other across, and that's unstoppable. You can stop many things, but you can stop a movement of journalists who are working together every day to make sure that their stories mean something. And uh, the statistics of where scaling and everything can happen, but for me community is key, and that's why I see our success.
Amazing. And now for the last question.
Yes.
What is a piece of advice that you'd give to other journalists or even other aspiring journalists uh, regarding the space that we are in, where the media industry is heading, what avenues or opportunities exist within the media space that they can exploit that you feel maybe are not served appropriately or are overlooked entirely that you feel need to be addressed?
Thank you. I think um the same factor that everyone is considering to be a challenge is the opportunity, and that's like, let's say the first one is the smartphone, right? um if we could just use even half of that phone as journalists to document our communities, we will be just unstoppable. um our forefathers would struggle to find ways of recording history and stories in their communities, and what we have now is we don't have a trace of, like, well, like most of our history. And now we have a chance at that because we have all these tools and gadgets and technology that can get us there. And I think it's a great opportunity for young journalists to see that. The other part is, money is key. Um, but money is not gonna be the first thing that you drives you into this industry. And the reason is that you really have to build a a body of work that speaks for you, that can then elevate you to a level where people say, well, we want to pay for that quality. And a lot of people argue that there's no money in journalism, which I think is debatable, but I believe there's so much opportunities and money in journalism that we need to be able to build for. So from the beginning, as a young journalist, know that the world is just open for you as a journalist and you can do everything. But before you get there, build a body of work, build a body of knowledge that makes you unique, different, and that if there is anything, know that if you chose the journey of being a journalist, it's not even like, it's a calling that is upon you now to use it to disrupt your community and make it better. But most importantly, that this continent, Africa, has been highly portrayed as a dark continent for a very long time. And I believe that that power is in young journalists to turn around the tide and tell the stories that no one has ever told. And it won't be a Ugandan coming to tell the Kenyan story. It will be the Kenyan young journalist telling the Kenyan story as well as in Uganda. And if we put all those stories together, I can assure you that we will be unstoppable. The problem and the challenge is that we don't see that power. And if there's anything I can tell you, that you should believe in it and you should give it and you should feed it as much energy as you can, because that's the only way that power of narrative change will work for you and will work for others.
There's nothing to add on to that. I feel like adding anything to that is to dilute that. Thank you so much for coming on to the show,
Thank you so
and
much for
thank you for
hosting me.
sharing your wisdom with us.
It is a pleasure,
Wow.
and I couldn't be, much honored to be here, and especially with the work I do with young people and young journalists. So seeing you guys take this initiative to be here to set up is just a dream come true.
Thank you so much. I think that is a wrap for this episode. Let us just end it there. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much.